Fallout 3 was a special game, and just like Oblivion, my first memory of this game is not actually playing it, it's watching my older brother play it. I was 10 when Fallout 3 came out, so I was probably slightly too young to fully understand what was going on. But I remember the game so vividly. I remember life in the vault, exploring the elementary school filled with ghouls right beside it, saving Megaton, Liberty Prime, the list goes on, and this game is so influential both in shaping my love of games, but also the industry as a whole. So now in 2023, with Starfield right around the corner, it's time to go back to Fallout 3 to see if it still holds up today. So I went into this with two objectives. One, I wanted to explore the world and finish the story so that I can really get a grasp about what this game is all about now in 2023, because it's been quite some time since I played it. And two, I want to see the best and worst parts about this game and see if any of these things crop up later in Starfield when I finally get my hands on it. So of course, any video about Fallout 3 has to talk about the opening, and as I said back then, this opening was iconic, and even to this day, and yes, it might be nostalgia speaking, this opening is brilliant. It's a bit slow now because I've beaten the game like 10-15 times over the past however long, but seeing what life in the vault is like, and then finally having that exiting the vault moment, it's still iconic to this day. And yes, it's probably nostalgia speaking, but it kind of gives me goosebumps when you leave the vault. And from there, you get to explore an amazing world. And realistically, that's what Bethesda are best at. When it comes to the various Bethesda games that I've played, the one constant throughout all of them is that the world is absolutely fantastic to play. So I've played every Bethesda game from Oblivion all the way up to 76, and exploring the world in these games, it's just phenomenal. There are very few developers that make world exploration this compelling. And different games from the Bethesda catalogue have loads of different problems. You know, Oblivion's combat is a bit iffy. Skyrim is probably a bit too easy and cheesy to break. Fallout 4's dialogue and a lot of its quests are pretty boring and basic. But what they do so well is that once you get into that world, yes, you can see the flaws, and yes, they are there. But when you are walking around the Capital Wasteland and you have Tree Dog in your ear and you're listening to I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire, the atmosphere is unmatched. It's amazing, and the opening cutscene of this game just encapsulates the whole atmosphere of what makes Fallout great. And it's this post-apocalyptic America that hasn't forgotten its history, and it's perfect that this is set in Washington DC, because one of my favorite things about this game is that a lot of the quests revolve around getting the Declaration of Independence, or going to the Washington Memorial, or seeing robots that are actually the brains of ex-presidents, and that whole Americana stuff, I guess is what you'd call it, is what makes this game so special. And it's something going into Fallout 4 that I really like. So of course, exploring the world, you're going to run into loads of random NPCs and get some cool quests. But one thing that I really want to highlight in this video, and this goes for every Bethesda game, is that regardless of what playthrough you do, if you go through and you want to do like a completionist playthrough where you go through and you play 70, 80, 100 hours, do loads of side quests, visit loads of locations, beat the main story, fully level up, or you want to do what I did here for this review where I beat the main story, I didn't reach the level cap, but I did loads of side quests, you still get a full experience of what these games are. And it's why they're so replayable, is that every single playthrough you will find a new area you've never discovered. You'll find a new quest that you never did. You'll maybe try a different build that you never did. There's just a special sauce in a Bethesda game that I really hope that they bring into Starfield, because even in Fallout 4, which I think is probably their weakest, obviously 76 aside, of the main sort of single player ones, Fallout 4 is probably the weakest as a whole package. It still has that Bethesda core of this is a great world that you can run around and explore. Yes, a lot of the quests in the weaker games like Fallout 4 are a bit boring, but you still have the Silver Shrouder quest. You still have loads of quests like that. So that's one thing that I really wanted to talk about, because it just highlights what I love about these games. Even though I've done most of the side quests in Fallout 3 throughout the years, there were still a couple of areas and a couple of quests that I did on this playthrough that I'd never experienced before. And even now, after I've probably beaten this game 10 times, there were still quests that I came across that for whatever reason I either don't have much memory of or I've never experienced, full stop. And now I haven't played Fallout 3 since I played Fallout 4. And I ran into a quest to do with the railroad and synths, and there was a synth on the run in the Capital Wasteland, and there was a guy in Rivet City that was looking to kill the synth, and then there was someone from the railroad who was trying to save the synth, and it's like somehow a weird call forward, not call back, I don't know what you would, like foreshadowing as to what Fallout 4 was going to be, because obviously that's one of the main plot points of Fallout 4, the railroad versus the Institute and saving synths or killing synths. But now I've gained extra appreciation for that questline, whereas in a previous playthrough I wouldn't have really thought much about it. Now unfortunately there are certain things in this game that either A, weren't really good when they came out, or B, haven't aged that well. So I think the worst part of this game, and to be honest it's probably the biggest criticism of most Bethesda games, is that the main story just isn't that compelling. Look, Liam Neeson plays your dad, and of course I love to see Irish people in games and movies, and overall his performance is really good. Obviously his voice is iconic, but the story itself is a bit lackluster. So this is going to go into full spoilers here, but my main issue with the story is that it seems to end before it really even begins. So it starts off, your dad leaves the vault, you leave the vault, and you have to go find them. Eventually you do find them, but it feels like there's a handful of missions in between you not being with him and you being with him, and then a mission or two, and then he's dead. And then you have like the big final mission where they whip out Liberty Prime and blah blah blah. You're going shooting down all the super mutants and the Enclave, and you know, it's a cool set piece ending. But a lot of it's just half baked. So you meet the Brotherhood of Steel, and then you figure out that later down the line, if you explore an area, you find these outcasts, which are like an offshoot of the Brotherhood that went rogue because they didn't agree with what they were trying to do, which I think is a really cool idea, and I kind of wish they honed in on that in the story, because I actually don't think it's in the story. I might have missed something, but from what I've played and when I beat the story, you don't meet those outcasts through the story. You find them elsewhere, and I think maybe one of the scribes or something mentions them if you like press them or you go deep in their dialogue tree, but other than that they're not really used. And then when you do meet the Enclave, it's one mission. You get captured by them, and then in that same mission, you destroy the computer that is actually John Henry Eden. And then like the end comes. So within a couple of missions, you meet your dad dies, you meet the Brotherhood of Steel. They're not really used very well. And then the Enclave come into it, and then you destroy the Enclave in a mission or two. And then that's it. And I don't remember it being that shallow, but it really felt like completely half-baked and shallow, and I don't remember it being like this. I know, as I said, Bethesda stories usually aren't the greatest, but I thought this one was longer, but it really didn't feel like that. And of course, we have to talk about the combat, which is easily the worst thing about this game. This is future editing Adam here, and I know I said that the story and the gunplay are both the worst part of this game. The story is not the worst part. It's actually the gunplay. It was never really good, and today it aged like fine milk, because the shooting in this game is absolutely atrocious. Now, I did play a bit of Fallout 4, and the shooting is much improved in that game. So I'm happy to know that going forward, even today where I hadn't played Fallout 4 in a while, the shooting in a Bethesda game can still feel pretty good, and I'm hoping in Starfield it feels better. But in Fallout 3, I deliberately built a character that was really strong in VATS, because I knew that any attempt to shoot and aim, especially because I was playing on the Steam Deck and not a mouse, would just be a complete waste of time. So if you build a character that uses VATS, it's pretty okay, because you can get away with almost never really having to aim. Obviously they built the VATS as a way to kind of counteract the terrible shooting, but it really is that bad. It's honestly awful. But if you build a character around VATS and play it more sort of like an RPG and not a shooter, then it actually is pretty good. But then you get into the RPG mechanics, and they're a bit broken, but after coming off and playing a bit of Fallout 4, I can appreciate that this game actually is an RPG, whereas Fallout 4, yes, it has RPG elements, but I wouldn't consider it a full-on RPG like the way Fallout 3 or New Vegas are. And since it's an RPG, what you say actually matters. You can be nice, you can be funny, you can be an arsehole, And the second you get into Megaton, you have a choice of either blowing it up or saving it. And even though the choices are pretty binary, you can either choose the Enclave or choose the Brotherhood of Steel or choose to save Megaton or choose to destroy it. It's still nice to have these moments in these games so that going forward, when you do want to go back and play them, you can go choose a different option. Even though it's nothing new to RPGs, it's just a nice choice to have. Now, building your character only really matters for like the first maybe 10 levels, because then eventually you just get really overpowered. I can't remember the exact level I got to when I realized eventually I will almost be able to have 100 in every single stat. But eventually when I leveled up, I just had like 30 points to put into one skill point, and I had already 4 skills that were at level 100, so I was just pumping them in. But if I reached the level cap, I would have 100 in a lot of the abilities. So as an RPG, eventually you just become overpowered. Now, I personally don't really mind that, to be honest. I like the power trip of these sort of Bethesda games where, yeah, at the start they're maybe slightly hard, or you might die once or twice because you fought an enemy that was too high level or too hard for you. But eventually, just like in Fallout 3 or in Skyrim, you become a 100 sneak, 100 archery thief that can do 10 times sneak damage, and you just one-shot everything. And I don't think it's too big an issue in these because, yes, the older Bethesda games are more RPG-ish than even something like Skyrim is more of an RPG than Fallout 4, but you can see the lineage of becoming less and less RPG-ish and be moving towards RPG light open world games. And I don't think being overpowered in a game like this is too much of an issue. I'd say in a game like, I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3 right now. In Baldur's Gate 3, if I was overpowered, I think it would detract from the experience, because part of that game is kind of being afraid of what's around every corner and every combat encounter kind of feeling a bit tense. But Bethesda games, even the older sort of very RPG-ish ones, never really felt like that. Oblivion had some difficulty to it, but again, once you got through a bit, you became super overpowered. But I don't really think that's an issue, because we're here, well, I'm personally here to explore a world and get some unique weapons, meet some unique NPCs and do some fun quests. And whether you are a perfectly balanced character, an overbalanced character, or an underbalanced character, I don't really think it changes the experience, because you're still getting those great quest lines. Now, as for the DLC, I only played Mothership Zeta because the other ones I've played previously, the only one that really sticks out in my mind, and it's for the worse, is the Pit. I know a lot of people like this DLC, but personally, it's a cool location, but I've played that DLC, I think, twice. And both times, I have fun. And then you just realise, oh crap, I have to go collect like 100 iron ingots. And the whole thing is just collecting iron ingots. From what I can remember, it's been a while since I played it. But I didn't particularly like that. The other DLCs I did like. And then this time I played Mothership Zeta because that was the only one that I haven't played before. And this DLC is just straight up bad. I've never felt more bored doing a DLC. The whole premise of an alien crash landing on a post-apocalyptic world is cool. You get abducted by aliens, you're exploring their ship, but exploring their ship is so boring. You're fighting the same enemies, you're using the same weapons, and the characters in it just don't really do much. There's a little girl, Sally, who has been captured, and she was the best character of the lot because it was weird how sort of capable and used to it she was, and it kind of found it funny. But then there was other characters who are previously captured humans. There was like a samurai that only spoke Japanese. There was an astronaut. And then there was another woman who was captured that was trying to help you. And as of recording this, I can't remember her name, and I can't remember anything about her character because she barely speaks in the DLC. Just exploring the interiors of this DLC is just... It's just not fun. I kind of wish they did more with it. Maybe had the aliens come down and you could maybe even pick up logs from them where they're exploring the world and talking about what a super mutant is or something like that. But instead, you're just exploring a very boring spaceship fighting, I think, maybe 3 or 4 different types of enemies using 2 different guns that are like super overpowered, which are nice. I do like that they added new weapons. But yeah, it's just not a DLC that I liked. Overall, though, I really had fun going back to Fallout 3, and I do think that if you've never played the game, it is worth sitting down and giving it a chance. Look, you could probably buy this game for like €5 or $7.50 or something with all the DLC at different points. And at that point, I played it on my Steam Deck and it ran perfectly. So if you have a Steam Deck, it's a perfect Steam Deck game. And at that point, there are certain games that I would recommend, if you're like interested in the history of the gaming industry, of playing them. And I think like Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout, out of Bethesda games, they're the sort of three that I would recommend, because it's nice to see how influential they were. Yes, certain things don't hold up. The RPG mechanics are slightly broken. I don't really think that's a big issue. The main story is very weak, and probably the weakest of the Fallout games. But exploring the world is just, as I said, there's a special Bethesda magic sauce that even I've played a small bit of Morrowind, and yes, that game is a bit more obscure than these games. Even Morrowind has that. That game is very dated. And Fallout 3 is nowhere near as dated as that. It would be kind of difficult to get into. I think ultimately you just kind of want to build a character around vats so that you don't have to shoot as much. And then have fun just soaking in the atmosphere. Go explore some vaults, because exploring vaults is like brilliant. Just learning the different histories of the different vaults. They're all some social experiment to some extent. And this is something I only discovered maybe 5 or 6 years ago, because before that, when I played it, I didn't really explore the vaults, and I didn't take time to read the notes or listen to the audio logs. So there is a lot here. There's some very good side quests and just fun exploration. To this day, and it has some good DLCs as well. To this day, Fallout 3, still a great game. Yes, it has issues, but I'm glad I went back to it. So, I really appreciate you watching. I will probably have a video out on Fallout 4. It won't be as in-depth as this because I haven't played as much. And then Starfield will be out. So fingers crossed I get a code for that from Bethesda, from the early access. So fingers crossed. There will be a Starfield review. There will be Starfield streams. I can't wait for Starfield. So let's hope it's good. Thank you for watching. Join the Discord and Twitter, and I'll see you all on the next video. Goodbye.